My daughter threw a cake at my face when I refused to gift her my house. "It's already mine," she screamed. "My name is Henrietta Allwood, 75 years old enough to know that the older something gets, the easier it is for people to forget it was ever important. And if you've ever had your own child look you in the eye and say, 'Mom, you're just in the way,' then maybe you'll understand." I'm not telling this story to defend myself. I'm not asking anyone to decide who's right or wrong. I just want to speak with the voice of a mother who once gave up every corner of her house, every penny from her retirement check, every warm meal she had, for people who now call her a burden. There are dinners where no one saves you a plate. Rooms that used to be yours, now filled with things no one wants. Moments when you catch yourself asking, "If no one wants me here, why am I still here?" I used to stay silent, thinking that was love. But silence, when held too long, turns into a way for others to forget you ever had a name. The cake hit me square in the face. Buttercream and all. Cold frosting clung to my nose, a streak of white sliding down my left cheek, landing softly on the wool scarf I knitted last winter. I didn't wipe it off. Not right away. I just sat there for a moment, still, hearing nothing but scattered laughter, a few clinking glasses. No one gasped. No one even muttered a polite, "Oh dear." It's been years since I was the host at my own table, and tonight I was officially removed from it. This house, a 2-story stone home at the end of Willow Lane, was built in 1892. I still remember the scent of old plaster the day my husband and I first moved in. Now it gleams with soft yellow lights Delilah had installed, complete with motion sensors and Bluetooth music. But there are things she couldn't replace. The exposed brick wall where I used to hang our wedding photo. The carved oak table, passed down from my grandfather. Tonight, I was seated at the kids' table, a flimsy folding one, covered in a disposable tablecloth, wedged next to the sink, by the garden door. Joni was the only one who glanced my way now and then. She didn't say a word, just quietly placed a bottle of warm water beside me and turned away. She knows I can't drink ice water, like the younger ones. The Thanksgiving preview dinner, Delilah's tradition. She likes to test every dish ahead of time, throw a little dress rehearsal for her city friends and neighbors whose husbands work in banking. I just bake the pecan pie. No one ever eats it. Too sweet, too gluten-y. Apparently, everyone's been gluten-free for a month now. The room smelled like cinnamon, expensive candles, and roasted meat. Not the kind I used to make, but the kind rubbed with herbs and glazed with honey instead of gravy. On the main table stood a bottle of red wine, labeled Green Estate, Holiday Reserve. I read the label again. Green, not Allwood. As if the house had already changed owners. As if I was just a tenant now. Troy raised his glass, tapped it lightly against Delilah's, then said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "And here's to a smoother inheritance update this year. Let's make sure everything's transferred before the fiscal deadline." Some people laughed. I didn't. I set my fork down, dabbed my mouth with the corner of the napkin, and said, quietly, but just loud enough for those at the main table to turn and look, "I never agreed to that. The house is still in my name." Delilah's face flushed. She stood up from her chair, fast, and walked straight toward me. The room went still. Even the jazz stopped playing when someone brushed the remote. "You ruin everything," she said, louder than she needed to. "We've already planned it all. You don't need to worry. You don't need to interfere." Before I could speak, the cake, the one I baked, was thrown right into my face. I didn't feel pain, just cold. Cold from the frosting freezing against my skin. Cold from the way everyone looked at me, like I was some maid who had just spilled wine on the new tablecloth. Troy forced a laugh, said something like, "Every family's got its drama." Someone turned the music back on. Saxophone notes floated up again, trying to cover the thick silence Delilah's scream had left behind. People resumed their toasts. A few guests slipped into the next room, mumbling something about checking the wine storage for the holidays. Delilah stood frozen, both hands still covered in icing. No one handed me a napkin. I reached for my own scarf and slowly wiped my face. I didn't cry. Tears are something I learned to hold back a long time ago. Back when Delilah first asked me not to come to her parent-teacher meeting because she said I made her look bad. I stood up. No one stopped me. The chair creaked softly as it scraped against the wood floor. I pulled a tissue from my coat pocket, dabbed the sticky sugar from my chin. I didn't say a word, didn't look at anyone. Joni stepped aside quietly. She didn't touch me, didn't speak, but her eyes said something she might never be brave enough to say out loud. I walked down the hallway, the same one where I once hung Delilah's childhood drawings. Later, my granddaughter's. Now, only wedding photos, Delilah and Troy, every frame engraved with the Greens, a legacy begins, legacy. And yet no one speaks the name of the one who built it. Before I reached the door, I turned back one last time. No one looked up. They were already back to their roast, their wine, their soft lights, and artificial laughter. I saw Delilah's back, her curled hair, the red velvet dress I ironed for her this morning. She said the waist was wrinkled. The door opened. Cold air slapped my face awake. I smelled snow, wet pine from the backyard. I closed the door slowly. No rush, as if I was just stepping out for a walk. But I knew every step I took across that stone porch, every footfall on the snow-covered path, was me walking away from a role I had played for far too long. No one called after me. The door shut behind me, and for the first time, no one came running. I hadn't even taken off my coat when I heard my name, not in a loving tone. I froze. One hand caught at the collar of my scarf, my breath suspended in the cold air, as voices drifted down the hallway. The heavy curtains covered the windows, but the walls weren't thick enough to block out the kind of whispers meant to be heard. Delilah's voice came first, tight, sharp, like a drawn bowstring. Then Troy's, lower, but no less firm. They sounded like two people drafting a plan, and I was the footnote at the bottom. Henrietta won't resist. Your mother's not the same anymore, Troy said, with a certainty that chilled me. I know, Delilah sighed. I put the papers in the office drawer. Once she signs, it's done. I leaned back against the cold wall. This used to be my husband's study. Now it's my bedroom. They talked about me as if I were already gone, as if I hadn't scrubbed every brick in this house with my cracked winter hands, as if the memories I hung on these walls, the autumn embroidery, the faded wedding photo, were just objects in a pending legal transaction. I sat on the edge of the bed, my eyes fixed on the fireplace. The fire still burned inside, but it couldn't warm what was burning in me now. My hands shook, not from anger, but from a deeper kind of ache. I reached for the notebook I always kept by the lamp. The pages were yellowed, the corners chewed by mice. My handwriting trembled, but the message was clear. They're trying to put me in a home. There's a transfer document. Don't sign anything. I stared at the words, as if looking into a mirror. Then, as if memory reached out on its own, I picked up the phone. Rosalind Myers. Her name was still in my contacts, even after all these years. A retired attorney, an old friend, the only person who stood beside me during the court hearing after my husband died, when the bank came to take the house because of hospital debt. She never took $1 from me, only said, "If you ever need me, call." I typed, "If you're still practicing law, I need you." I didn't expect anything, but 15 seconds later, my screen lit up. "Henrietta, listen to me. Don't sign anything. I'm coming." I bit my lip. In a house full of warm lights, that was the only message that made me feel like I still existed. No one else out there said my name with faith. I set the phone down. The wind howled faintly outside the door. The curtains stayed closed. A dim light spilled from the hallway. Joni's silhouette passed like a shadow cast in water. I didn't know if she heard what I did, but part of me hoped someone had, because this time, I wasn't staying silent. I sat still, in a room of thick walls and heavy drapes, trying to parse each sound that echoed from the hall. Footsteps. Soft ones. Careful. Joni, maybe. Then quiet again. The fireplace exhaled gently, its warmth uneven on my shaking legs under the wool blanket. A few moments later, Troy's voice returned. Calm, almost cheerful. We need her to sign before December 1st. That way, everything's finalized before the fiscal year ends. I spoke with Hensley's office. They can file it under a family benefit trust. It's clean. She won't sign, Delilah cut in. She's not stupid. She's just old. Then we follow protocol, Troy said. Schedule a mental health evaluation. Get the doctor's statement. Declare her legally incompetent. Lots of families do this. A cold hiss crawled down my spine. I was a nurse. I knew those procedures. I knew how people could strip someone of their rights with paperwork, with sterile words, with neat signatures on official forms. And I knew, if no one objected, it would all be called for their own good. I stood up, slowly. No more shaking hands, no more pounding heart. Only one thing remained. Clarity. The notebook still lay open on the table. I tore out the page, folded it in half, and tucked it into my coat pocket. Then I picked up the pen again and wrote one more line. They plan to use Family Benefit Trust to seize control. Needs physician's note. Check which doctor signs. When I looked down, I noticed a smear of frosting still on the edge of my shoe. Some butter on the hem of my sweater. I didn't wipe it away. I remembered when Delilah used to get sick as a child. How I'd sit by her bed, listening to her breathing. How I canceled shifts to stay home for 3 nights straight. And now, she was planning to put me in special care because I was no longer sound. Sound? I had never seen things so clearly. The phone buzzed. Another message from Rosalind. I'll be there morning of the 24th. Don't tell anyone. If they ask, just say, I need more time to think. I nodded. To no one. As if she could see me through the walls. Through the dark that hung inside this familiar room. I stood up, unwound my scarf, and hung it neatly on the hook. Then walked toward the bed. The room felt bigger now. Not painful, just vast, like waking up from a long, slow dream. A dream about a home, a dinner table, a daughter who remembered to be grateful. I turned off the light, sat down again, back against the wall. Out there, they were still talking, still planning. But this time, I would not stay silent. Rosalind arrived with an old map, not to show me the way, but to show me how to disappear. I had been sitting in the hollow mug for nearly half an hour, picking at a cold waffle and listening to the AM radio murmuring about the season's first snow. The long wooden table was scratched and worn, like the years etched into the hands of the elderly. I chose the seat by the window, the one my husband and I used to take. From here, I could see the little square where kids tossed snowballs with soggy mittens. Rosalind walked in, her posture as upright as it was back in high school. Gray wool coat, high collar, her silver hair neatly pinned up. She sat down without a greeting and slid a worn paper bag across the table. Inside was a hand-drawn map of Blue Hollow. I'm not here to lead you anywhere, she said flatly. I just want to remind you, there's more than one road, and not all of them lead home. I didn't answer. My hands curled around the white ceramic mug, the cafe's name printed on the side. The air smelled faintly of burnt cinnamon and old oil heater steam. Part of me wanted to cry. The rest just sat there, quiet, the same way I'd sat for years in that house. Delilah's almost finished, Rosalind said. I reviewed the papers. It's the standard template. All that's missing is your signature and a psych evaluation. My guess is they'll start pressing, probably right after Thanksgiving. I nodded. I found a copy. Troy left it in the desk drawer. Thought so. Rosalind pulled out her phone. I contacted someone. Silas Grant, private investigator. Used to work with the DA's office. Bit rough around the edges, but thorough. He can help. Surveillance, recordings, photos, whatever's needed. I glanced out the window. Snow drifted down slowly. Little white flecks blowing sideways, landing on the benches like unwritten notes. Will a recording be enough? I asked. If you play it right. I didn't laugh, because I know how to play. I've spent most of my life staying quiet about the things I should have screamed. The cafe door opened again. Joni stepped in. Navy coat, hair pulled into a loose bun. She looked around, caught my eye, and walked over slowly. "Good morning," she said, then turned to Rosalind. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Rosalind nodded, just once, measuring. Joni placed a small paper bag on the counter. "I stopped to pick up some pastries for my cousins. But I think I should say something." She sat down beside me, hands folded neatly in her lap. "Last night, I overheard part of a conversation. Not enough to understand it all, but enough to know you weren't part of the plan." I met her gaze. No anger, no questions, she continued. "For my son's birthday last year, you sent him a cake and a handwritten card. No one in my family's ever been treated like that. I remember it." My throat tightened, but not from pain. For the first time in a long while, someone remembered something small and meant it. "Joni," Rosalind said gently, "if you really want to help, we need a witness, someone who saw and remembers everything." Joni nodded. "I'll stay. I don't know much about the law, but I know right from wrong." I turned to Rosalind. "If I have to perform, I'll perform. But this time, I'll let them write the script. And then, they can live with it." Rosalind didn't reply. She just pulled the old map from the paper bag and laid it gently on the table. The streets had changed names. Some houses were gone, but the red mark in the western corner was still there, the place that used to be Delilah's daycare center. "We used to skip school here," Rosalind said. I smiled. Now I'm skipping out on my own life. We sat a while longer, barely speaking, each of us chasing our own thoughts. I traced the fading ink lines on the map. A small town I thought held no more secrets. Yet there were still corners I hadn't visited in years. Places where I once was truly myself. Rosalind folded the map and whispered, "I'll stay in Blue Hollow until this is over." I nodded, as if that were only natural. No one sticks around through winter, unless it's for something deeper than loyalty, for the truth. Her phone buzzed. A text. She passed it to me. "Silas Grant. We need a push, a dinner, a wrong word." I paused, then remembered. Delilah had said she'd host the real Thanksgiving dinner on the 24th. The preview was just for friends, which meant one more gathering, one last chance. I thought of the way Delilah had looked at me lately, like I was an old tablecloth, not fit for the main table. I used to ignore it, but now I'd place myself exactly where they could no longer pretend not to see what they were doing. Joni stood up, as if remembering something. "If you need me," she said, "I can act like I know nothing. But I'll be watching. I'm always in the kitchen. No one pays attention to the one pouring drinks or clearing plates. I can remember everything." I didn't know how to respond, so I gave her a long, steady look. Joni nodded once, then left the cafe. I watched her figure through the glass and suddenly thought of my mother, the quiet woman who lived beside me her whole life and whom no one ever really noticed. People like that, they are the memory of a house. Rosalind leaned in closer, her voice lowered. "Henrietta, if you're going to step into this game, you'll need one thing." "What's that?" "Patience." I smiled. Not a sad smile, but the kind only people who've lost too much know how to wear. "Patience," I said. "I've got plenty. What I don't have is a reason to use it." She placed her hand lightly over mine. Just a small gesture, but it brought back a flood of memories, of peanut butter sandwiches shared in the quiet back corner of the school library. I checked the time, 9:27 a.m. Outside, the snow kept falling. In this town, people passed through each other's lives, like footprints vanishing in minutes. But this time, I would leave a mark. I took a sip of cold coffee, watched the snow through the window. They'll slip. All I have to do is be there when it happens. We set the table beautifully. Because tonight's dinner wasn't just about eating. It was about laying down the cards. I took the linen tablecloth from the old cedar chest. Ivory, hand-stitched edges. A wedding gift from my mother in 1953. I used to think I'd only bring it out for special occasions. And tonight was one. Not for love, but for the end of an illusion. I picked the old china, the blue and white set. The last thing Delilah hadn't thrown out or replaced with something shinier. I polished every plate, every fork. Not for them, for me. I wanted tonight's performance to be complete. Joni stood in the kitchen, waiting, quiet as a soldier. I didn't say much. She understood. I heard the car outside, then the clack of heels on stone. Delilah entered first. Long coat, deep red silk dress, lipstick sharper than usual. She walked into the dining room like she was collecting a trophy. Troy followed, reeking of cologne, his eyes scanning the room like an auditor. "Oh, wow. Did you actually cook all this, Mom?" Delilah asked, fake admiration in full display. I smiled. "It's Thanksgiving, isn't it? It's supposed to be complete," Troy chuckled. "That's right. Complete. Food and decisions." We sat. Joni poured the wine. Green estate. A small detail, but heavy. On paper, they'd already begun branding things with their name. Things that were never theirs. Dinner began with honey-roasted chicken, then mashed potatoes, buttered green beans, and pumpkin pie, which I knew Delilah hated. But tonight, she smiled and ate like everything was just fine. I told a few stories, small ones, about the winter I was pregnant with her, back when this kitchen had no heater, and I used to warm my feet with bottles of hot water. They listened like I was reading aloud from someone else's fairy tale. Then, Troy set his glass down. "Henrietta, I think now's a good time to bring up some formalities." Delilah looked up. "Mom, if you're ready, we can go over the paperwork, just to transfer things over. Make it easier for us to manage everything." I looked them in the eyes. "So, which room were you planning to renovate first?" Troy blinked. Delilah laughed. "Yours, of course. We're turning it into a wine room. Classic cellar style. These brick walls are perfect. You're moving to the care home, right?" That moment, like a thin blade drawn across skin. No blood, but it stung. I didn't flinch. Didn't need to. Behind the kitchen curtain, I knew Silas was parked outside. Headphones in, linked to the recorder tucked beneath the china cabinet. Every word, already captured. Delilah refilled my glass, her voice syrup-sweet. "See, Mom? Everything's simple now. You rest, we handle it all. Your assets, the families, won't get tangled in red tape anymore." I set down my fork, wiped my mouth slowly, not out of anger, but because I was about to say something I'd never imagined saying. I placed both hands on the table, eyes on the candle flickering from a draft through the window. The flame didn't go out, but it flickered, as if eavesdropping. "I just want to be sure," I said softly, "that you two are really prepared to handle everything for me." Troy nodded like a man closing a deal. "Of course. You just need to sign. We'll take care of the rest." Delilah pulled a thick envelope from her purse, pushed it toward me. "Just a draft agreement. Nothing complicated. You'd still live here, until you didn't want to anymore." I smiled. "You mean until you decide it's time to move in?" She hesitated. No. It's just, we think you need a place with more care, more support." "A care home," I said clearly. No one argued. I pushed the envelope away and stood. Joni stepped forward with dessert, but I shook my head gently. "Joni," I said, "can you help me retrieve that file from my room later?" She nodded, her glance brushing over the other two. Quiet, sharp. I turned back to Delilah and Troy. "You think I don't know anything, but I know everything." Troy frowned. "What are you talking about?" I circled the table, resting a hand on each chair, each piece of china, each stitch in the tablecloth. Every detail here was a witness to my life in this house. I didn't need to keep it with a signature. I'd already kept it, with my entire life. "You think I'm confused. You think I don't understand the process. You think I have no one in my corner. But I've just been listening." Delilah forced a laugh. Mom, you're being dramatic. I cut in. Do you know where I sat yesterday? Troy narrowed his eyes. Behind the dining room curtain, I said. I heard everything, word for word. Turn her room into a wine cellar. She's not competent anymore. All we need is her signature. The air thickened. I sat back down, poured more wine. And tonight, you've repeated it all. Voluntarily. Troy shot up. You recorded us? I didn't answer. Joni stepped forward, tray in hand. She placed a slice of pecan pie in front of me, a dessert I hadn't made today. On top was a folded piece of paper. I opened it. A transcript of their words, recorded by Silas, delivered by Joni. No fanfare. Iva looked up, met Troy's gaze. I didn't record you, but I know someone who can. Delilah went pale. You're not allowed. Legally? I looked at her. Ask Rosalind. She's still holding the originals. Notarized, unsigned. Troy collapsed back into his chair. Delilah looked at him, panicked. I walked to the bookshelf, opened the third drawer, pulled out a blue folder. I do want to sign something tonight, I said. Delilah's mouth parted. I opened the folder. Not transfer papers, but a new will, prepared by Rosalind. It clearly stated, the house remains mine. No legal decision could be made without my signature. And an independent witness. I placed it in the center of the table. Looked at them. No anger. No sadness. Just clarity. Finally laid out between cold meats, a vintage tablecloth, and inherited dishes they thought were already theirs. I poured myself more wine and smiled. Good. Then let's sign something tonight. I brought a different set of papers. Some wills don't pass down possessions. They pass down awakening. Thanksgiving morning, pale sunlight filtered through the front windows, casting long streaks across the dark wooden floor of the living room. I sat in the old chair by the fireplace. My beige sweater still carried the faint scent of mothballs. That scent from when Delilah was still small, cradled in my arms, wailing from the cold. Across the room, Delilah stepped in silently, a file folder in her hands. Troy followed. No words, no eye contact. They thought I would sign, still believed I was the same old mother, afraid of conflict, always yielding, always stepping back. Rosalind had arrived earlier. She sat quietly in the far corner. Her hair was grayer than I remembered, but her eyes hadn't changed. Sharp as a razor, aimed only at the deserving. She reached into her bag, pulled out a thick envelope, and placed it on the wooden table in the center of the room. Joni appeared moments later, without a word. She nodded at me, then poured tea so quietly I didn't even hear her footsteps. I was the one to speak first. Before we sit down for dinner tonight, I think we need to have a conversation. Delilah let out a weary smile, tinged with triumph. About signing the papers, right? No, not about that. About this house, about its future, and about what I've chosen to leave behind. I opened the envelope Rosalind had placed on the table, pulled out a new will, clearly printed, dated, indexed, signed. I didn't need my glasses. I had memorized every line, spent sleepless nights over every word. And then I began to read, slowly, deliberately. I, Henrietta Allwood, being of sound mind and body, declare that the house located at 12 Hollow Pine Drive shall not be passed down to any individual family member. Instead, full ownership and all associated value shall be transferred to the Blue Hollow Women's Support Fund, a nonprofit organization serving elderly women who have been abandoned or lack a place to call home. Silence. Only the tick of the wall clock. Each second landing heavy. Troy shifted in his seat. Delilah stood frozen. I went on. This decision is the result of events that took place on November 22nd of this year. A recording has captured a conversation between Delilah Green and Troy Green, in which both parties discuss fabricating documents and committing me to an elder care facility with the intent to unlawfully claim this property. Delilah staggered, just slightly. Mom, what are you saying? Rosalind's voice cut in, calm, legal, unwavering. We have the recording, and under Maine state law, audio captured within a private residence where one party is aware and the other is not coerced, is fully admissible. Troy lowered his head. Delilah began to cry. Not sobbing, just that choked kind of cry, where the sound gets stuck halfway up the throat. You don't understand. We weren't trying to. I looked at her, this daughter I once held through the night while she burned with fever. The same girl I sold my last pair of earrings for so she could have a dress for the homecoming dance. Maybe I misunderstood once, but that day I understood just fine. Joni placed the teacup on the table and sat beside Rosalind. No one spoke. I nodded. There's one more thing. Rosalind took out 2 additional documents. One for Joni, one for me. We both signed. Witness 1, Witness 2. No one interrupted. I signed my name for the final time, my hand steady. Then I stood, looked straight at my daughter. This house does not belong to those who already think it's theirs. I didn't need to ask if Delilah heard me. Her eyes said enough, wide, hollow, like someone slapped with winter water. Troy stood stiffly, arms crossed. Rosalind remained still, waiting for the inevitable to land. And if either of you need clarity, I continued, placing another thin stack of papers on the table. This is a full copy of the documents you planned to have me sign. The ones outlining a full asset transfer in exchange for conditional visitation rights at a senior facility of your choosing. Joni cleared her throat. I knew she'd read it. Left out on the kitchen counter, just enough for her to see. No need to explain. Delilah reached forward, but Rosalind was quicker. Don't, Rosalind said, her lawyer voice cool and final. These documents were submitted to the main state system this morning. Henrietta's refusal to sign, along with the recordings, are now part of a formal counter-record. Troy gave a short, bitter laugh. The kind you make when you realize the water's up to your neck. What does this get you? He asked, his first real words all morning. We weren't taking anything. We just thought it'd be easier for everyone. I nodded. Most things that are easier for everyone start with someone thinking they're more entitled than the rest. Delilah stood, her cheeks flushed deep red. She looked around the room, then at the photo of her grandfather, the one I'd kept framed in oak and hung in the brightest corner. He was a lawyer, I said, not looking at her. And he believed one thing: a home is not something you can trick your way into. I watched Delilah blink, fast. Anger? Fear? Or maybe this was the first time she realized some mothers don't stay shelved forever. I said nothing more. Instead, I pulled a pen from my coat pocket. The same beige coat I wore the day I held Delilah for the first time. My back was stronger then, my hands unmarked. She was small, soft, like a dough not yet baked. The paper whispered as I signed. Rosalind gave a quiet nod. Joni laid a hand on my shoulder. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She had witnessed more than a signature. I stood once more, eyes still on my daughter. A home, I said, each word crisp, does not belong to those who already believe they own it. They left without taking anything, except the image of themselves reflected in each other's eyes. There was no door slamming, just an absence, long, quiet, and still warm from what had just been said. I stood in the kitchen, my hand still resting on the kettle's handle. The water was still warm. No one said goodbye. No one apologized. No one asked if I was all right. But for the first time, that didn't hurt. The kitchen looked just like it had last night. The old tablecloth had been folded neatly and set on the chair, the same one I'd used since our wedding. Every red wine stain, every frayed edge. I remembered hand-washing it in the winter, because I didn't trust the machine with my mother's hand-stitched linen. I'd brought it out so many times for family dinners. This time, it had been used to reveal the truth. I folded it slowly, smoothing out each crease. No rush, no regret. On the wall, Delilah's grandfather's portrait still hung. He wore a dark suit, looked straight into the camera, his eyes firm, clear. He spent his life practicing law. He taught me how to write clearly, sign with a steady hand, and never back down when the truth is yours. I never thought I'd need those lessons at this stage in my life. The clink of porcelain pulled me from my thoughts. Joni was clearing the tea. This girl had worked in my home since her early 20s, after her first divorce. I never asked much, just let her stay and bring her son with her. That year, he didn't have a birthday cake, so I baked one, apple. Simple. He smiled the whole day. Today, Joni set down another apple pie. More polished, more fragrant, but the cinnamon smelled the same. I followed the recipe you gave me, she said, placing the knife beside it. It's still warm. Please eat. I nodded. No words. Gratitude doesn't always need to be spoken. Rosalind walked in, holding a leather folder. She wasn't dressed like a lawyer anymore. Just a long brown wool coat, a scarf wrapped loosely. But she still carried the kind of presence that could hush an entire room with just one look. Here's your copy, she said, placing it on the table, then sitting beside me. It's all done. The fund will be announced after Thanksgiving. They can't touch the house anymore. I took out the edge of the folder. Paper is always cold, always dry, but today it carried the warmth of freedom. I don't know how they'll react in the long run, I said, still staring out the window. But at least now, they know. They know I'm not just some old shadow who gives up everything for pretend affection. Rosalind didn't answer. She knew. Some truths don't need comforting, just company. Out in the backyard, snow was settling on the stone bench. The coat I washed yesterday still hung on the line, now glowing faintly gold in the dusk. A breeze slipped through the doorway, tugging gently at the wind chime. Each chime sounded like it was counting the days I'd stayed quiet in this very home. Joni poured more tea. Have you thought about going anywhere? She asked, careful not to break the stillness. I smiled. Not yet, but maybe I'll start teaching a baking class. There are a lot of older women in town. Many of them live alone. Maybe they need a place to start over. Like me. Joni nodded, her eyes softening. I think a lot of them will come. I wasn't sure, but I knew one person would show up at that table. Me. I pulled my notebook from the drawer, the old brown one with frayed leather, its spine barely holding. Each page held a piece of life, but I'd never written for myself. Only grocery lists, Delilah's vaccine schedule, Troy's favorite chicken soup recipe, all notes for someone else. I flipped to the last page. For the first time, I wrote a sentence that wasn't for anyone, just for me. My name is Henrietta Allwood, and I still have enough in me to begin again. I inhaled deeply. The air carried cinnamon, Earl Grey, and something clear, like the pressure in my chest had just been released. Rosalind stood, adjusting her coat. I need to head out. Still have a few more files to finish. But if you need me, call. She didn't smile, but her eyes made a promise. Thank you for not forgetting me, I said. We never really leave each other, she replied. We just take turns being quiet. Then she left, like wind. But I knew. Someone who truly knew me had chosen to stay. Joni tidied the table, but left 2 slices of pie. This one's for you to keep, she said. The slice from the first time, and the slice for the new beginning. Then she, too, slipped away. No more words needed. The kitchen was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty. I opened the fridge. A few red apples. Their skins tight, glossy. Maybe tomorrow I'll try a new recipe. Maybe I'll write a flyer, pin it to the bus stop, the library. An invitation to women who haven't been invited to sit down, sip tea, and laugh over a pie that cracked in the oven. I'm not leaving this house to Delilah, but I am leaving it to those who understand the value of presence. Starting with me. I stepped out onto the back porch. The snow had melted a little, leaving glistening patches under the fading light. I touched the coat on the line. Rough spun wool, but sturdy. Beige, with a golden hue. The same one I wore when I carried Delilah into the sun for the first time. And now, it's still here. Just like me. I turned back, looked through the window. The kitchen, a place of laughter, of tears, and long, aching silence, was no longer a memory I feared. It was a beginning, not for them, for me. I opened the door. The cold brushed my cheek. Not biting, just a gentle reminder that a new season had arrived. I stepped onto the porch and opened the door wide, as if waiting for a new guest, or maybe a new version of myself. Some dinners don't end with a toast, but with the quiet click of a door closing behind the one who once kept the fire burning in that home. Henrietta had once yielded, stepped aside, stayed silent, only to be met with a glance of dismissal in the very kitchen she helped build with her own hands. But then she realized, when you give and forget yourself in the process, there comes a day when your presence is treated as something that can be replaced, like an old tablecloth, one that had soaked up both tears and laughter, faded, and folded away without a second thought. Henrietta didn't choose revenge. She chose to stand. She signed a will that left behind no wealth, only the worth of a life well lived. And if this story made you pause, even for a moment, think of the woman who once made tea for everyone each morning, quietly. And if you're lucky enough to still have her, don't let her be the one who has to open the door alone.